Hey, I'm Quence, and I am back to bring you my top 10 favorite movies from the year 2023. I watched nearly 100 movies that came out last year, and it was a very difficult challenge narrowing that down to a list of just 10 of the best movies. I really had to kill some of my darlings here, but I do have some special awards and some honorable mentions for some of those movies that didn't quite make the cut, but I think are still worth seeing and worth talking about. Also, I'm going to plug my Letterboxd right now. If you want to see how I feel about movies during the year, instead of waiting until the last minute, then you can follow me there and see all my reviews, my little brief blurbs that I give, and my star ratings. And then you'll be ahead of the curve because you'll kind of have an idea of what my favorite movies will be before these videos come out. You can tell all your friends and they'll think you're really cool. And now I won't waste any more of your time. I'm going to begin with my special awards, not part of my official top 10, but movies that are special for special reasons. First up is my Not Really a Movie award, and this one goes to Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour. Okay, it is technically a movie, but I typically just don't include concert movies or documentaries or anything like that when I'm making these lists for myself. Helps to narrow things down. I like to keep it to the strictly scripted, fictional kind of stories. Still, I can't deny that I'm a poptimist and a Swiftie on the low, but even non-Swifties will have to acknowledge the power of the Eras Tour movie. It's a 3-hour-long tour de force, which I think means forceful tour in French. You're running through all of Taylor Swift's album history, and she's looking good while doing it. Everything looks good, the stage, the effects, the choreography. It's a really impressive show that I was not able to buy $2,000 tickets to see in person, so this is the next best thing. It's also worth mentioning that it was one of the biggest box office hits of the year. Taylor Swift single-handedly reviving movie theaters. It's not, again, traditional scripted entertainment, but as far as Taylor Swift concert movies go, I don't know what else you could possibly be looking for when you go to see this. I can't imagine that there's anybody watching this movie and not getting something out of it that they want, unless it's 1989's Wildest Dreams. It's an iconic show full of iconic songs and performances, and this is a great recording of the event. My next award is the I love this movie, but I think it's actually bad award. And that one goes to the Super Mario Brothers movie. I love this movie, but I think it's actually bad. As a massive Nintendo fan since I was but a babe, I was both excited and frightened to witness what the team behind the Minions movies was going to do with Mario. As it turns out, I had an amazing time watching this in the theater. I was there with the crowd, mostly full of 10-year-olds and their parents, plus the odd aging video game fan like myself, and hearing kids' reactions and excitement to everything happening on screen was infectious. The movie is loaded with Easter eggs for fans, and I had a huge grin on my face the entire time that I was watching it, loving every stupid little reference to something from a 1990s or 80s video game that I remembered, to the point where I found myself tearing up several times throughout, not really because the movie is emotionally affecting on its own, but just from the sheer realization of this cornerstone of my childhood being brought to life in such a massive way, and also seeing that it was still resonating with kids that are growing up now in the theater as I was seeing it and remembering things from my childhood. It really hit me in a profound way. That said, the plot basically doesn't exist. The characters are thin, the jokes are stupid, the forced pop songs are cheesy, and there's just kind of nothing of substance here at all. It's a big ball of cotton candy that's fun to eat while you're eating it, but doesn't really feel that good afterwards. I have not rewatched the movie since I saw it, and I'm kind of afraid to. I kind of don't want to, because I think I'd rather just live with the memory of the experience and not have to come to terms with how lazy and dumb the movie actually is. But I still can't deny that I had an exceptional time watching it. Lastly, I have my how do you even classify what this is? I don't know award. That one goes to Skinamarink. Now, Skinamarink is technically listed as a 2022 movie, but it didn't actually get a theatrical release, as far as I can tell, until January of 2023, which makes it one of these annoying movies that kind of lives in limbo between 2 years, and as a result doesn't always get the attention it deserves when people are talking about their favorites of the year. But it's getting the attention from me. I'm making sure to include it in some form or fashion in this list. And another reason this one won't get that attention is because it's an extremely off-putting and unfriendly viewing experience. This is a horror movie which is, yes, primarily made up of grainy shots of hallways and closets while nothing really happens. If someone tells me they think Skinamarink is a terrible movie or that they had a terrible time watching it, I'm not going to argue with them. Of all the not for everyone's out there, this one is really not for everyone. It does a very specific thing that I think resonates with very specific people. And if you're one of those like me, it could very well terrify you. This was one of my favorite movie theater experiences of the year, just like Mario, for very different reasons. There were not happy 10-year-olds screaming and cheering. Instead, there were people who got up and walked out after 30 minutes. And I couldn't really blame them. But I thought it was one of the scariest things I've seen in recent memory. There are a handful of moments that I think about and still give me goosebumps. And I will be envisioning in my nightmares every night as I lay my head down to sleep, haunting me, keeping me from my sweet, restful slumber. But it does really require you to give yourself into the experience and immerse yourself without any distractions. You have to be willing to allow this movie to get under your skin, and it's not going to work for everybody. But it's a truly original film, and it's kind of become a part of my everyday vernacular. I'm always talking about getting skinamarinked or skinamarinking somebody. I think it's iconic, and I think it's one that is going to be a big cult movie in years to come, but certainly I understand why it didn't break out into the mainstream. All right, enough of that. I'm now going to get into my official top 10 movies from 2023. Appropriately rounding out the bottom of my list is Bottoms. At first glance, this looks like a modern take on the high school comedy that we don't really get anymore. Basically something like Superbad, but more relevant to today and aimed at audiences that aren't necessarily straight white boys, although at least one of them is. And that would be enough for a fun movie, which Bottoms is, but gradually as you watch it, it starts to creep more and more into the realm of the absurd. I'd compare the humor in this to something like 30 Rock. The jokes come at you fast, and reality as it exists in this universe is nebulous at best. It's a hyper-exaggerated version of the high school experience. Everyone doesn't just act like they worship the football players. They will literally sacrifice everything else as a priority to meet the football players' needs. The uncool kids aren't just neglected and bullied a little here and there. They are openly referred to as the ugly and untalented gays over the school loudspeaker. It's a lot of moments like this that add up to something really, really funny. We don't get a ton of great comedies in theaters anymore these days, but this is absolutely one of them. Like the best comedies, it never gives you what you're expecting, and it feels like something that's entirely its own while still obviously living in the same world and genre as these other teen high school comedies. But it really hit the right notes with me. All the acting is great, and put Marshawn Lynch in more movies. I don't know what this guy did before he acted, but he is a funny man. And I really love Ayo Edebiri, who I was introduced to in The Bear. She's so funny, and all the way that she voices her lines and her expressions is so weird and interesting. I'm really excited to see her pop up in more things. Okay, now it's time to get serious. Enough comedy, enough laughs. We need movies that are about real people and heartbreak and loss. The shit that actually wins Oscars, which brings me to my number 9 movie, Past Lives. Past Lives follows the trajectory of a Korean woman and her relationship with a boy she met in her hometown before she moved to America and lost touch with him. It isn't flashy, it isn't complicated, it's a simple, beautiful story that gets to the heart of what really everyone on this planet has wrestled with at one point or another by the time you get to a certain age. Who am I? Why am I like this? What choices did I make that led me here? How would my life be different if I had taken one path instead of another? In a weird way, this is kind of like the adult version of all the multiverse stories that are happening in media these days. Very much of a piece with Everything Everywhere All at Once from last year. Sort of the non-sci-fi exploration of why those themes resonate with so many of us. Another thing that's great about Past Lives to me is that it never creates drama or conflict just for the sake of it. There's no evil husbands or petty scheming exes. Everyone here is just a human being. They're not good, they're not bad, they're adults talking about their lives, hashing things out, wondering why they are the way they are. It's all too rare a thing to see a movie that really respects audiences in that way and allows them to just get absorbed in these characters and their stories without feeling the need to interject artificial conflict because, well, that's what stories do, right? You got to have someone fighting with somebody. You got to have a third act where they're feeling real down and then they get brought back up, yada, yada, yada. This movie doesn't care about any of that stuff, which is not to say that it's doesn't have the important dramatic story beats that you want out of a movie like this, but it feels very natural and very organic and very real. It's a sweet, calm film that is easy to recommend. Kind of a romance, but not in the traditional sense. It really is about what our lives are and why. And boy, exploring your past is hot this year because it's also a major theme of the next movie on my list, number 8, All of Us Strangers. Unlike Past Lives, Strangers actually gives us a literal exploration of the past, as in this movie, the central character interacts with past versions of his now deceased parents. I love a movie that's not afraid to play around with reality, and if there's not really a literal explanation for it, all the better. Is this a Field of Dreams type situation and we're supposed to believe he's seeing his parents as actual ghosts? Is he just crazy and everything's in his head? You can read into it one way or another, but it doesn't really matter. You don't need to ask these questions. Instead, I think you should just enjoy the movie for the moving, dreamlike poem that it is. The story deals with two kinds of love, essentially. There's romantic love, and there's the love between parents and their children. And it's kind of a rare thing, I think, to see both in one movie. Although we get plenty of romantic dramas every year, parent-child relationships are usually saved for teen comedies or maybe aging Judd Apatow movies. And in this one, too, it's a very specific kind of parent-child relationship. It's an adult man reckoning with the way his parents treated him as a kid, and them reckoning with that as well in light of the fact that they died when he was young. And the movie isn't just about that, but it's also, again, about romantic love. It's about different kinds of love and just the fact that it's love and how powerful that can be, which sounds pretty trite when I say it out loud like that, but it is anything but trite in this movie. It's serenely sad, yet it manages to find enough hope amidst the tragedies that this is very, very far from misery porn. It's the opposite, if anything. A heartfelt navigation of loneliness, grief, and loss. Truly moving and beautiful. You can't do much better than All of Us Strangers. Switching gears, next on my list is No One Will Save You, a sci-fi thriller very much up my alley. It's about a woman who lives isolated from the rest of society and has to deal with some alien encounters. Now, the big gimmick of this movie is that there is no spoken dialogue. Most of the film focuses only on our one central character in any given scene, and even when there are other people around, nobody says anything. This makes No One Will Save You the epitome of the old adage, show, don't tell. No one talks, so there is no telling. It's literally all just show. That means you do away with any tedious spoken exposition and explanations. Everything about the protagonist's backstory is revealed to you naturally over the course of the film via things that you see in the background or learn about by watching the character's actions, and how she's feeling at any given time is conveyed by her actions and reactions to what is going on in any given situation. It's an impressive feat to be able to carry a movie basically all on your own without any conversations, spoken conversations to lean on. And I give the lead actress a ton of props for pulling that off so successfully. but the movie would still be great even if you axed the no-talking gimmick completely. This isn't just an exercise to display that. That's just another layer that's cool, but there's also a whole other set of layers that's great underneath it. It's a super tense and original thriller, and if you're someone like me who has had a mild phobia of alien abductions ever since watching X-Files and Signs as a child, you'll find the opening scenes of this one effectively freaky. But then the movie continues to evolve and open up, and it's not just tight suspense scares, although it is that. You also get a lot of really creative science fiction elements, and the more that you learn about the characters, the more you care about them, the more meaning it has. I just had a fantastic time watching No One Will Save You, and because it went straight to Hulu, I think this is an easy one for people to miss, so I'm recommending it every chance I get. My number 6 movie is Saltburn. At this point, I'm going to see anything that Barry Keoghan is in. He seems to have a knack for picking extremely interesting, off-kilter films, and this is probably his biggest, most high-profile, and arguably best role yet. He plays a kid who's invited to stay at Saltburn, his more popular friend's big, fat, classical mansion in the countryside over school break. This is a polarizing film, which I can understand to some extent. There are some, shall we say, shocking scenes of a weird and sexual nature that definitely made for some interesting reactions in my screening. I don't think it's played just for shock value, though. In my opinion, this is a fascinating character study of, again, the character played by Barry Keoghan, who just has this little twinkle in his eye the whole movie that's making you constantly wonder exactly what is going on inside of his head. And by the end of the movie, you'll have a completely different idea from the 2 or 3 other ideas you had of him before. At least I will. It is, some parts of it are telegraphed a little bit, but I found the journey was well worth taking. This is also a movie about the disparity between social classes, in this case with one of those classes being the extreme mansion upon mansion upon mansion owning elite, Downton Abbey level we're talking. And are those people terrible people? Yeah, kind of. Are they misunderstood? Sort of, but not really. They're given enough depth to be sympathetic, but my reading of this movie is staunchly a critique of the upper class. But on the other hand, Keoghan's character is certainly no hero. It's a messy, complicated, and weird movie that doesn't give easy answers. And I found myself kind of rooting for everyone and no one at the same time, or for different people at different times of the movie. I'm not totally sure if that was the intent of the filmmaker, but for me, I thought in that sense it was very effective, and it was a hell of a lot of fun to watch. It's weird, it's funny, it's quippy, the dialogue moves, the scenes move. This is one that's not going to work for everybody, but I really, really enjoyed my time with it. And on the subject of weird and messy is my number 5 movie of the year, Yorgos Lanthimos' Poor Things. This one stars Emma Stone as a sort of Frankenstein's monster, a grown adult with the mind of a child who now has to learn and experience the outside world for the first time. First off, I think this is probably the funniest movie of the year. It's packed wall to wall with quotable lines. Yorgos Lanthimos has a gift for making strange worlds come to life, and especially for making insane dialogue come out of his bizarre characters' mouths, somehow sounding like Shakespeare, and I don't think that any other director could quite do it in that way. It's almost a Coen Brothers-esque, I feel. I think this could be a movie that certain people will watch over and over and memorize every line so you can use them when relevant in real life. It really has some very, very funny moments. I've seen Poor Things compared to Barbie, and along those lines, I've also seen it criticized for its perhaps less than thorough understanding of feminism. As I am not a woman, I will not comment on that too precisely, except to say that it seemed to me an empowering and cunning critique of a male-driven society. But, what do I know? I'm one of those dumb males. Beyond that, though, I think the movie speaks to everybody. It isn't solely about women's experiences, although that's obviously a major part of it. The aspect that resonated most with me was watching Emma Stone's character Bella's journey through life. She starts out as a simple child, essentially, and then she rapidly undergoes these changes that we all undergo, from naivete to cynicism and beyond. I see it as sort of a microcosm of the human experience, which is, kind of a lot to fit into one movie. It's kind of some big ideas going on there, but I think this one pulls it off with, shall I say, aplomb. God damn it, I said it. It does a stellar job, and it is funny as hell and so damn weird in the most compelling way. I really love Yorgos Lanthimos' work, and it's so interesting watching his progression from his earlier movies to this one. And I love that he can get awards attention and big name actors while still being completely unapologetically his weird ass self. What's up, Danger? My number 4 movie is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Don't forget those hyphens. Is this the greatest superhero movie ever made? I don't know, but it's up there. As a massive Spider-Man fan, I don't think any Spider-Man movie has gotten as close to the spirit, heart, and soul of the comics as the 2 Spider-Verse films have. Across takes everything that was established in Into, kind of hard to talk about these movies in that way, but just bear with me, and improves upon it, in my opinion. The story is deeper, the animation is better and bolder, does even weirder, crazier things than the first one if that was possible, and the characters get more time to shine. Plus, the Easter eggs and references are even Easter eggier and referencier. Again, as a big Spider-Man fan, seeing what they put on screen here was like a dream come true. It's like everything that I see in my eyes at night exploded onto the big screen. Like the Mario movie, it's a celebration of everything in this franchise's history, except that underneath that, there's actually a great movie. And with great movie comes great substance. It's another one delving into the idea of who we are and whether or not it would be worth it to go back and change the past to have a potentially better future. Do we have to suffer great losses in order to realize our potential? It's a weighty subject, but it meshes perfectly with Spider-Man's backstory. And because everyone is so familiar with that backstory, the filmmakers are free to play with those notes and rearrange them in spectacular and amazing ways. We're back to the multiverse stuff in a literal way here, but this isn't just a kid's movie or a superhero movie with the negative baggage that term now has. It's a movie that everybody should watch. I'm agonizing over the fact that we're probably far longer out from the 3rd movie in the series than we initially were told. But even with this one's open ending, I'm not mad. I can't stay mad at a movie that's nearly 2.5 hours long, ends on a cliffhanger, but still just leaves me excited for more, seeing those credits roll, wishing I could have sat down and just watched the next installment immediately in the theater. The energy, the excitement that this one generates in me, I just love it so much. But I guess not as much as my number 3 pick, which is The Holdovers. And I think this is Alexander Payne's best work in years. Paul Giamatti stars as a curmudgeonly teacher who's forced to spend Christmas break watching over the holdovers, the kids who have nowhere else to go for the holidays. Now, if you think you can see where this one is headed, you're probably right for the most part, but it's the impeccable execution that makes the holdovers so enjoyable to watch. Paul Giamatti is such a wonderful actor, and I really think his screen presence doesn't get the credit it deserves. He is so effortlessly charming and interesting, even when he's acting like a complete jackass, in fact, more so at that time. And he has an awesome chemistry with his younger co-star in this movie. Man, I saw The Boys in the Boat. I thought that movie was so goddamn boring, and my mind was drifting, and I kept thinking, you know what would make this movie better? What if Paul freaking Giamatti was in this movie? He'd be so much fun, because you can't watch him on screen and not have fun. You're never not directly engaged with his performance, his voice, his mannerisms. It's so damn good. Anyway, The Holdovers is more or less a tribute to movies of the 70s in its look and its tone. Another one of these movies they really don't make too many of these days. Your mileage may vary, but I'm a movie crier, and this one made me cry or tear up several times throughout, not because it's sad necessarily, but because it's so touching and poignant and relatable. I guess I'm a sucker for heartwarming Christmas time movies, so sue me. But this one really exemplifies the idealized version of that holiday to me, without strictly being about Christmas. The story's about going through tough times and learning to find a family in the surroundings you've been forced into. It's just such a cozy, pleasant film with its snowy New England setting, its big, old-fashioned, empty school building, Christmas trees and fireplaces. I just wanted to curl up and spend time in this place with a big warm blanket. It's so lovely to stay in. And I could have watched another hour of this movie just showing scenes of the characters' day-to-day activities without any real plot progression. This one is so high up on my list because I really think this is one that I'm going to be returning to around the holidays, probably for the rest of my life. To me, this instantly became a classic on the level of other movies that you always see on TV at the holidays. It's a Wonderful Life, Die Hard, and the rest. This one just slots perfectly into that niche. It's so comforting and heartwarming, and it really hit me in all the right places. My number 2 movie is Anatomy of a Fall. This is a French film about a woman whose husband has died due to a fall, and she now has to defend herself in court to prove that she isn't the one who murdered him. From that plot summary and also from the movie's trailer, this one kind of sounds like it's a true crime-esque thriller that's mostly concerned with the whodunit of whether or not the main character actually was driven to murder. And a big chunk of the movie does take place in courtrooms and how the evidence does or doesn't shake out. And it's a supremely compelling aspect of the film. But that's also, I think, shortchanging what is a much deeper, more interesting narrative than that. It's an examination of the relationship this woman had with her husband and the one she's trying to cling to now with her young son, and how he's affected by all of this, and how kids can get caught up in these horrible situations and how to deal with that, and how easily the perception of these relationships can be altered by an outsider's perspective. People who are looking in and don't know all the details of this relationship. What does it look like to them, and who can really say what the connection is between two people? The most memorable scenes from this movie to me are the brief glimpses we get via flashback of the husband when he was alive, and how complicated and real those scenes play out. There's one in particular that's a conversation between the two of them that is an example of some of the finest acting I've ever seen in a movie that I think is really going to stick with me for a long time. Another thing I love about this movie is kind of a running theme of a few of these on my list, is that the main character is never portrayed in a really negative or really positive light. There's no cheap, lurid side to this movie about society's fascination with killers or anything like that. It's all played very fairly, very sympathetically, and it's entirely up to the audience to decide what they think based on their own life experiences. The movie takes its time. It's slowly paced, but I think expertly paced, exemplary editing in this one. It never drags. The story beats are doled out piece by piece just enough to allow you to draw your own conclusions. And every time you think you maybe have a handle on things, they throw a new wrinkle into the mix. But it never feels like a cheap twist or like it came out of nowhere. It always feels earned, and it feels organic when it's introduced. It's gripping, it's compelling from start to finish. Obviously, one of the best movies of the year, and it's my number 2. Which brings me to my number 1 favorite movie of the year at last, and that one is Beau is Afraid. Ari Aster has become one of my favorite working directors. After giving us Hereditary and Midsommar, he proves that the line between horror and comedy is a very thin one with Beau is Afraid, and when you play with that line a little bit, incredible things can happen. This movie follows Beau, played by, I think, the always amazing Joaquin Phoenix. He's just such a great actor, as he navigates a life full of fear and anxiety. All right, talk about playing with reality. This movie holds nothing back when it comes to creating a reality that's more reflective of how some people see the world than others perceive it to be, or perhaps than how it actually is. But I will insist, as this movie does, that the world is a terrible and frightening place to inhabit, and the scenes that bear out in this film prove why. As someone who has had feelings of anxiety before, you can see it all here on the screen in the vein perhaps of something like Uncut Gems. You really get that insane stress pushed upon you with every crazy scene of this movie, as it begs the question, what if our worst fears came true? What if for every situation where we said, what's the worst that could happen? The absolute worst thing that could ever happen happened. It's an exaggeration, but it's also kind of not an exaggeration, depending on your perspective. Oh yeah, and by the way, this movie is also uproariously funny. Astor knows how to display the absurdities of life in an exaggerated way that can either be hilarious or horrifying depending on the lens you view it through. Often it's both. This is not always an easy movie to parse, and I'm not going to pretend that I've fully absorbed everything it has to offer. I think that much of it I may be dealing with years from now in therapy. But the parts that really hit me, from the horrors of everyday life to the trauma that can be put upon you by your family, to dealing with strangers and the need to appear polite and the boundaries you're willing to brush up against and the suffering you're willing to put up with when you're having to navigate those waters. It is an audacious, transformative work. The kind that a lot of people will look at and call pretentious, and maybe they're right, but I have no problem with pretension in movies. Often it's catnip for me. If you want to laugh, but also get your heart racing and freak yourself out and most likely experience something that you have never experienced in any other movie you've ever seen, Beau is Afraid is the one to do it with. There you have it. Those are my 10 favorite movies of 2023. Wow. What an exciting year it was. I like I said, I'd struggled to fit everything onto this list that I wanted to. I felt actually quite bad about leaving some things out of my top 10, which is why I'm now going to present 10 more honorable mentions, movies that didn't quite make the cut, but I still think are excellent and worth seeing. And I will briefly present them to you now, not necessarily in any specific order. Barbie and Oppenheimer, two movies that have nothing to do with each other, but will forever from now on be inextricably linked together in discussion. I loved both of these movies. Barbie, super, super funny. Oppenheimer, fascinating character study. It was really great to watch this one on an IMAX screen. Blackberry, this is from one of my favorite people in the world, Matt Johnson, and it stars Glenn Howerton, who you probably know from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, giving an incredible performance. It's the story of the BlackBerry phone. Really, really, really great stuff. This was like so close to making my list, as was Dix the Musical, which is, I don't know, arguably the second weirdest movie Nathan Lane had an appearance in this year after Beau is Afraid. This is an insane comedic musical that was maybe the hardest I've laughed in a movie all year, but I did think a lot of it was kind of uneven. Not all of the jokes and musical numbers land, but it's a very specific kind of humor that I really, really loved. Dream Scenario, starring Nicolas Cage. Super creative examination of fame and what fame does to people and how it makes us view people who are famous, plus Nick Cage. You can't argue with him. The Zone of Interest, really fascinating and oppressively uncomfortable movie that takes place during the Holocaust, mostly seen in slice of life views of a family of Nazis living directly next to the Auschwitz concentration camp. Truly unsettling, horrifying stuff. Raging Grace, this one is a really great thriller about the immigrant experience from a first-time director. I think it does a lot of great stuff and it's worth checking out. Couple more comic book movies I'll shout out. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which I think is a great wrap-up to that trilogy, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, another one with a great art style that really brings the Turtles to life in a fun, new way for me as also a Turtles fan. And last honorable mention, The Boy and the Heron. Not my favorite Miyazaki film, but I think a really great send-off for his very long and important career, assuming he actually does stay retired this time. Again, if you'd like to follow me and you have any interest in my opinions on movies, or if you agree with them, or if you just want to see how wrong they are, you can always check me out on Letterboxd at Quence. I'll put a link in the description. It'll be fun. You can follow me. You can read my stupid, pretentious comments there instead of waiting until the end of the year. And of course, go to jonathanestis.com and check out all my podcasts and other ongoing projects that I currently have, my newsletter, things like that. Don't forget to check out my top 10 TV shows of 2023, which will be up shortly if they aren't already. Let me know in the comments what you think of this list. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Did you hate Saltburn? Did you hate Beau is Afraid? I want to know how wrong you think I am. Talk to me. I love you, and I love us all. I'm Quence, and this has been my top 10 movies of 2023. Goodbye!